Well, this took a while, but it's not for the reason that you'd think. Final Fantasy III, a game released in 1990 for the Famicom, only in Japan. Now for you, the American person that doesn't know anything about Final Fantasy, you may wonder, wait, didn't the game get released on the Super Nintendo? No. The Final Fantasy III that we got was the 6th game in the series. If you've kept up, you know how this hellhole has developed. And to the European person who knows nothing about Final Fantasy, well, at least you didn't care about Final Fantasy. I also have to wonder why you're watching this video in the first place, but I hope you have fun. We're going to be looking at the DS version for this video, as it's the first time the US and the UK actually got the game. Unlike the second game though, where there wasn't really much changed, the 16 weight kind of made it slightly different. With the release of the DS and the PSP, they had to show off that handheld gaming can indeed do 3D, even if the devices weren't really built for 3D. Unless you want to use that lovely touchpad, no one does. I'd also talk about the dual screen for the DS, but it's rarely used, even in cutscenes. It's only used for menus and maps at the top screen, so PSP is looking better right now. So in the original, you were in control of the Onion Children that came across a crystal that tells them that they are warriors of light. The DS remakes? You're only in control of one freelancer, and he runs into the water crystal that tells him to find the other warriors of light. Which makes the remake kind of bloated, which is not the last time I'll say that. Not to say it doesn't give the characters some personality, though they aren't any more complex than an NES game. Makes sense, I suppose. Well, the game also has NPCs that are important to the story. Stories being told. There really isn't a specific story for the entire game, but more so a game that feels like a season of a fantasy adventure show. Starting with a 2-episode pilot revealing their identities as orphans, an episode of the night bringing the princess, the scary cat most likely being gay, the official art kinda makes it that apparent, good for you Rabia, and Cid pretty much saving the saviors of the world. All hail Cid, the real savior of this world. And yeah, like previously, you can name the characters whoever you want, and while their official names are Lunith, Art, Rifia, and Ingus, I named them Rabia, Rachel, Zidane, and... Good question. The original name was Joseph, but I died 2 hours in and I resorted to one of my old files. Hey, it makes conversation more hilarious. I'll name my children after you. How about you don't? The overall plot is the 4 Warriors of Light fighting the 4 Crystals of Light. Sound familiar? Go over the towns and dungeons containing the monsters guarding said crystals and beat the big bad at the end. There are some small twists though, like the land you've grown up in is just a floating island in the corner of an even bigger world. Though it's not much bigger in scope since you have the airship, which is really fast, and apparently faster in the bigger world if you really think about it. And yeah, you upgrade your airship later into a flying submarine, and you later get the Invincible, which is just a slower ship that does have its very own shop in and giant chocobo. The fat chocobo aren't really special, they're just kind of like a storing system. And if you want to keep some of your equipment for later, you can do that. Another debut for this game? The Moogles, the flying fairy rats that only exist to be adorable, and most of them either let you send mail to people online, which doesn't work anymore, but some of them are in the servitude of Dogo, one of the students of the great Magus, Noah. This is where the story kinda picks up, as he talks about Zande? We'll go with Zande. Another student under the eyes of Noah, and his desire to plunge the world into darkness after he is gifted mortality, when Dogo was given knowledge and Une, the third student, complete control of the dream world. To be fair, that is kind of a lame gift, but his actions are a little extreme, so he does help us to get the ability to turn the ship into a submarine, and tells us to find Une, who sleeps in the ancient ruins. I like both of these characters, not just in personality, but they actually help you in battle every so often. Every guest character has a great supportive skill that makes progression, and let's face it, grinding, much more manageable. While on the topic of gameplay, there is one small addition that makes Final Fantasy III stand out from most of the series' entries. Even today, the job system. Well, the first game was the introduction to this, but 3 goes hog wild on this idea, expanding the line from 6 to 23 in the 3D remake, thanks to the Freelancer class. The way that you get these classes differ in the remake, but the amount is still the same, except for the Undead Knight. Remember when I talked about the Moogles in the towns? Well, you needed to talk with people using that system. I didn't really bother with it since it all seemed rather tedious. But whatever the case, it is an optional class. What we have otherwise are fantastic. You have the returning 6 classes from the original, with the addition of Rangers, Dragoons, Trash, several types of mages, and summoners. Now personally, I haven't experimented with most of these classes, for some reason or another, but let me talk about the ones that I did use to kinda tell you how I played. I'm generally a fan of sweepers, characters that can do massive damage as fast as possible. Classes like the Dragoon, Ranger, and Dark Knight were the 3 classes that I stuck with once they were available. Surf started out with the Warrior, Monk, and Thief classes, the later mostly for locked doors at the beginning, but I did use the steal ability every once in a while, especially on bosses in the first third of the game to get some free high potions. But when I obtained the Dragoon, that was his class from then on, With the jump ability, he was kind of a force to be reckoned with. Ravio was the white mage for the majority of the time, and upgraded to a scholar for a while until I realized the magic pool is kinda shallow. I tried the bard for a while and realized it was shit, even with the high amount of harps at your disposal. I think they were just a compensation of how useless this class was. While Rachel stuck with the red mage for a majority of the first half, to take advantage of white and black magic as well as dealing good physical damage. I tried out the ranger, and with her job leveled up, she was a VIP for the rest of the game, wiping out almost every monster in a pinch. Zidane experimented with a lot of physical classes, considering he was a knight, which was one of the classes that I used, but eh. Along with that, I used the warrior, the monk, the viking, and finally fitting myself with the dark knight. The attack damage is exquisite, and the soul eater skill was a great way to deal damage with every enemy on screen. While many of them are great, there is one thing to keep in mind. Whenever you switch jobs, you need to level said job from the beginning. Leveling up in general is not enough, as job leveling impacts how many times you attack per turn, how many damage you deal with magic and physical attacks, and even affects critical hit chances, which you would think leveling up normally would have the same effect. And those do affect your overall stats, strength, ability, vitality, intellect, and mind. But the thing is, they kind of do affect those too. And each class has specific equipment that affect their offense and defense much differently. Some don't even have that many options at all, like the mage types. Also, if you change jobs, there is a specific wait time for performance, which I'm not 100% sure it affects, but it is an unneeded mechanic. And getting into new jobs can be a little frustrating, especially if you have slow party members. So I learned this at the end of the game, but leveling up your job depends on how many actions you complete. Each battle gives you job points, which are invisible stats, so you don't know how many you have, and you only get a vague idea once you, well, level up. So here's a graphic to demonstrate. So you need 99 points to get a job level, and for the first 13 levels, every 5 actions will give you a level. That sounds simple, but after that, some jobs will have a harder time gaining experience. I'm so glad the Onion Knight isn't required, holy shoot, that would have been horrible. And of course, if you do not complete any of these actions, say because you got interrupted with a status element, die, or finish the battle, that character will not get those job points. So what is the solution to this? Well, most actions will give you the job points, except affecting your position in battle or fleeing. So if you want certain characters to level up, just have everyone shift front to back and let the job points accumulate for those characters. It is essentially more grinding than you can ever want to do, and yeah, it's boring as hell. I usually don't mind grinding, sometimes it can be therapeutic. But this isn't fun or relaxing, this is dull. Looking at the same battle for minutes on hand, seeing everyone shuffle around, it's better when everyone is doing their part, since it's visually more interesting. But if you have someone lagging behind, well, good luck not going insane. That is the one thing wrong with the job system though. Otherwise, I love the idea of selecting new jobs, experimenting and deciding which is best for which situation. And some bosses are weak to specific builds, and sometimes they are explicit on what you need to do. Now, the bosses are typically fun, some of the best parts of the game, but some of them are just... ugh. The first pain in the ass was Gilgameth. Screw this chicken bastard. 2 hours trying to deal massive damage with what I have here. Maybe the bard was a mistake. It was a mistake. But the lightning attacks just destroy the entire party. Just look at that. And that was from full freaking health. And then we had Doga and Ine near the end. We had to fight them in order to save the world, and while it is heartbreaking taking out some close friends... oh, just f*** these two. Are they testing us or trying to spill their podium with our blood? Also, why do they look like this? Doga looks like an Aurora unit on LSD. And Une, like, shit. I know you control the Dream Realm, but you don't need to look like a freaking nightmare. Une is the worst of it, since you have to fight her right after Doga, and she is aggressive as all hell. After killing them, you're given 2 keys for the final dungeon of the game. So I stocked up on equipment, remembered this town sold summoning spells, and also remembered that Odin was hiding in this spot, so I kicked his ass, and I got to the Crystal Tower. Quick note on the summoning spells though, because this is the first time they appeared, and for what they are, they're good. I only used them for the tower and they were barely useful, to which I'll get to in a second. But we got awesome power in the form of Shiva, Ramu, Ifrit, Leviathan, and the Bahamut King himself, which I also found some worshippers of. And after all this is said and done, I'm joining the cult. But Odin was one of the summons I used frequently, along with Ifrit with either the chance to heal the party or do some good fire damage. Only problem with the summons is the effect is random, meaning summons like Shiva, Ramu, and even Bahamut are kind of annoying since their white magic skills are not very effective. Ramu, I love you and your massive beard, but your mind break is seriously not helping me. But back to the Crystal Tower. So you have 2 options. You can go to the Forbidden Land and get some of the best weapons in the game, which is highly recommended, or you can just go over to the final boss now. Let's start. You go through the town, it takes you roughly 30 minutes if you decide to collect all the treasure. Use an other shroom to teleport to the outside by the time you see the mirror and save. Go back to the mirror and damn it, the mirror has cursed us with worms. The darkness will soon spread and we are all doomed. Thankfully, Doga and Une were with us and go to fetch the ones with the purest of heart. Starring with Zedong's buddy, Eve the savior of the world, Rachel's jackass buddy who is somehow alive, Rabio's gay royal buddy, and one of the crazy old men in Amur who we should thank for being alive. With the power of friendship, they lift the curse for a moment and we head to the world of darkness, beat up Xande, and fight the darkness itself, or just die. With the darkness in pursuit, Doga and Une use all of their remaining energy to revive the warriors and tell us to free the 4 warriors of darkness. Of course there is. So we do just that, kill all 4 of these bastards, screw Cerberus, I died to it twice, and we go over to the darkness. Sounds like a lot, doesn't it? Wouldn't it be a shame if you lost all that progress? So remember that one part where I said teleport out of the tower to save? Unlike the previous 2 games, you cannot save in dungeons. You can only save in the overworld, and since you have to do all that crap in one go, you'll have to do all this all over again if you bite the dust. And the bosses you have to fight are aggressive. While you will be fully healed after every boss fight, you have to deal with a lot of the aggressive enemies on the way, making the journey much more exhausting. I've had to go through all this, the hallway, this 5-minute cutscene, the Xande fight, the scripted fight, the 2 to 3 minute cutscene, and all this crap. It's kind of exhausting. I've had to redo at least half of this process over 5 times, and the point where I actually fought the Cloud of Darkness, I didn't prepare and I pretty much had to go back to that point while doing some more grinding, which, again, I don't mind, but it was still kind of discouraging. And I'll say the final fight is tense, but it's actually fun to take out with the right setup. But it did take a little too long to get there. Remove most of the castle, or let yourself save before the point of no return. This would have been a great end to an already great game. All of that said, I am very conflicted in recommending this game. Job level problems aside, the game is quite fun. It's fairly basic, but the battle system is varied thanks to the job system. The story is, again, basic, but effective. The characters are likable, and the music, oh man, the music is magnificent. Except for the song that happens almost every time you save a part of the community, that gets a little annoying after a while. The graphics are fine, though I'm not exactly a fan of the character designs, except Sid, he's perfect. The rest just look like generic dolls that emote every once in a while. And while the ending is a painful slog, the moment I fought the final boss was extremely satisfying, though the tedium may have contributed to that. If you don't mind about the tedious endgame, give it a shot. If it's any consolation, it is the best out of the NES games, when comparing to the remakes. I hear the 3rd game is actually pretty good on the NES. Oh lord, I can only imagine how slow the Invincible is back then, and oh my gosh, this would have been a nightmare. I may have to experience that in the future. God help me. If you want to play the game, it's on the DS, the PSP, has a mediocre PC port, which I'd rather you steer clear of that one. And if you're really curious, you can also try out the NES version, which there are plenty of translated ROMs out in the wild. It's certainly the best game in the original trilogy, but the next time we visit the series, it's gonna get real good. However, kind of burnt out on Final Fantasy for a while. So, I don't know when I'm gonna go back to it. Maybe sometime this year. Maybe later down the road, I don't know. But until then, I got a lot of things planned for this year. 2020 is upon us, and there's just a lot of games that I want to get into. Including next time. I forgot how to end these things.